I had the most thought-provoking conversation this week, and I hope that you'll join me for it. Tsao-Lin Moy and I sat down and had a conversation about biological age versus chronological age, how that factors into health and fertility, as well as pulling in reproductive technology and some ethical considerations and questions that you may want to ask before you go down the road of IVF or other assisted reproductive technologies. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I'm excited to be joined today by Tsao-Lin Moy. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tsao-Lin.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrienne.
So tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm an acupuncturist and fertility specialist. I actually specialize in women's health, Chinese medicine, and what we call alternative to the allopathic way. I have a brick and mortar practice in Union Square in New York City, and really helping women that struggle with fertility and other health conditions to heal themselves, to tap into their innate healing ability and really give them hope, like to empower them that they have this power and healing within them, and really to take it back or just take control of it and really learn how to be healthy.
I love that. So she and I totally come at the body and the care of the body in a very similar way with that Chinese medicine background. One thing that really stuck out about the way that you did your introduction is around the body's innate ability to heal. I want to expand on that a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. Everything we need, or what I would say is the healing we seek, is already inside of us, right? And we are born with our, let's say, our blueprint, divine print that comes in, and it's our life force. And so when we're out of balance, there are mechanisms and systems for us to go back into balance, to heal and transform. And you can use medicines that are out that come like plants, and let's say pharmaceuticals, you can exercise, you can do all kinds of things to really tap into this healing mechanism. So somebody else doesn't have power over you. Like, you are the all powerful, but oftentimes we hand that over. And so no matter how powerful a medicine may be, it's really going to be your body receiving it. And not just on the physical plane, but we're looking at energetic, and we could go spiritual, right? They're kind of like different, I would say, levels, but really all one thing. And so understanding that, making that connection and really to yourself to be in alignment is what helps the healing process and to become stronger and to connect to the divine universe, or what I consider like your divine intuition is really what that is. And when we have that, then we really are able to make better choices, informed choices about our health. And so that's the underlying, I have my tools of the trade, right, to help. But really, what is that doing? Is helping the individual to realize, hey, I've got this power, and to take it up.
I love that. So you captured where I was going with this, is that we tend to give our power away. And you did mention that as you were giving this empowered, you hold the keys in your own body description. In the traditional Western model, we tend to come at the body in a biomechanistic way. Like the provider is a mechanic that is going to fix things that are quote unquote broken. And we internalize that and feel like there's something quote unquote wrong with me that needs to be fixed. And this is one of the reasons that I was really drawn to Chinese medicine as a person and as a practitioner, because it's not a you are broken. It's a coming into right relationship with self, which is a very different way of looking at the body. It's more biointelligent rather than this, there is something that needs to be fixed.
Exactly. And so when you were just speaking, it came to like we have a kind of a language in the way that we speak about ourselves. And when we're looking at allopathic medicine, the language is of disease, right? Mm-hmm. When we look at more, let's say, tradition, and I use the word traditional, meaning like East Asian, indigenous learning and healing, that we're looking at a health perspective, right? At like healthier and really not like, oh, I need to get out of bed and do the one thing. It's really like everything supporting like the entire community, the world, the universe. Like, am I in, and you use the term right relationship, which is interesting because I have one of my teachers, Sharon Weisenbaum, who I had, she talked about being in right relationship. But that's also the zheng, meaning like the up, when they say you're upright, the Chinese upright, meaning that you're between heaven and earth, the idea, and man or person is in between and kind of in that alignment, even how you sit, that straightness, and allows for the flow of energy and to be one, right? So you're like connected. And in our language, like that is, if we talk about something's wrong all the time, then the focus is on the wrong and not on the right, what's right, and what we need to do to go into balance. Yeah, broken and fix model, right? Usually what I talk about, that's it's broken, we'll fix it. But the broken part is really a symptom of something else, right? It's symptomatic that something else is out of balance to then cause something, right? Just like a table, it's like kind of out of balance, and then, what happened? The dish fell and broke. Oh, we need to glue the dish back together. But, that wasn't, the cause of it was coming from underlying something else.
That's the other reason why I really love working in this modality. And I really do bow to its wisdom, because that sophisticated pattern recognition system that has been passed down for thousands of years recognizes these relationships with these underlying pieces. And root and branch theory, I think, is just so brilliant in that, well, this symptom didn't come from this thing on its own. It stemmed from this underlying piece. And yes, we can deal with the symptom, but when you're dealing with it at the root issue, it's meaningful. You're not putting a Band-Aid over symptoms so that you can go about your day, because the more we Band-Aid things, and historically Western culture likes to do that. We like to Band-Aid things, whether it's escapism over dealing with emotions, or it's we have a symptom, we take a pill. We tend to Band-Aid things in a lot of cases in our culture. And with your specialty in fertility and hormone balancing, fertility is definitely one of those areas where there tends to be oh, you have a hot flash. Let's talk about hormones instead of the way that a traditional modality would look at it as, okay, there's an imbalance and the hot flash is a symptom of that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to say about the Band-Aid, because you just like came up, was like, okay, so these are short, they're kind of like shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And so the Band-Aid, treating one part of it could be like a false friend. We'll put it that way. Like a false friend is that you do the Band-Aid and the person does get better. But that's also, we can't necessarily attribute to the Band-Aid. We have to look at it like, oh, that person's body heals itself too. And the Band-Aid kind of supported it, but that wasn't the intervention that actually did the thing, right? And so I think that is where kind of like making the connection that, oh, it must have been that. And then it kind of can disregard that we have this innate healing, that we can heal ourselves. So I just wanted to say that we're always healing ourselves. We're always going towards balance. And sometimes it means that we go off balance, like the big, like back and forth. Yeah, with the hormones, it's because we know that they're involved. It's like an easy thing to pull out and you can actually add something and things get better. But if you have like a problem that's like really deeper within, it's going to continue, right? So medication is not going to actually address, let's say, the root imbalance. It's like, oh, the boat is filling with water. I just keep on pulling the bucket out. Yeah, it's okay, although like doing that. But unless you're looking at where the leak is, it'll keep on filling up. And you can go on, if you're able to keep on pulling the water out of the boat, you can go on for a while. But ultimately, it's not a cure, right? Or it's not sustainable. And then something else is going to happen because of it. And then that becomes when we look at chasing a whole bunch of symptoms and then the addition of like polypharming, like, oh, well, side effect. Okay, but we'll give this for you or that for you. And so in a weird way, it's very limiting. It's a limitation of looking at when someone is unwell, looking at only like one little thing versus like being able to take all of it in. And then also give them that agency to make changes and reflect back. And the individual knows their body the best, right? Like they just need to like connect and have that relationship.
So let's talk about this in a fertility focused kind of way, right? So usually by the time people reach me, they have either been trying for a while or they've had a loss or a couple of losses, or there's something that isn't working properly from their vantage point. And they've already emotionally, though, made the decision that it's time to have a baby. So from your experience and this idea of creating balance and harmony in the body, where do you hope to see people seek you out in that fertility journey before they come see you?
So fertility is really like when someone is struggling to get pregnant. I just want to tap in that it's not just the woman's issue. Although we see more women because they're much more taking responsibility for what's going on, assuming it's their fault, when like almost 50% is going to be related to the male. And even if they go to a fertility clinic and the spouse or the partner is giving a sample, even if it's not that great, they're kind of like, yeah, it's fine, it's normal, it's okay. So there's really no like kind of responsibility or really like given over even for the male to like make an improvement because someone else is taking care of it. And it's just like too easy to be like, oh, well, it's probably her, right? And that's like an issue that we have to address within ourselves, that we are the stronger of the species, right? Because life is not going to hand over humanity to the weakest link, right? If you think of that, doesn't make sense, right? So what would be the most beneficial is really like starting early on for women, young women, teenagers, males, to really be aware that what they're doing now, the actions into like late teens, early 20s, it's like you're borrowing from your future. And at some point, you're going to have to pay interest. And so kind of when you decide like, okay, now I'm going to stop drinking coffee, I'm going to stop alcohol, I'm going to exercise, like now it's kind of like you need to take more time to clear your system out to rehabituate or habituate, let's say, if you've never done it before, understand like what your body's rhythm is and make those changes. And I think I'm always amazed when I have a person who comes to see me in their 20s and they're so like aware of what they're doing in an organized way, not in a fad way of like, oh, I follow this influencer, but really they're like, oh yeah, I don't do that. So they're conscious about their choices. And I think the earlier someone can learn about it for themselves. So let's say a young girl or lady is having menstrual issues. When she goes to her physician, they're going to basically prescribe a birth control, right? They're not going to investigate, well, what's happening? What are you eating? Are you anemic? Are you staying up late? Are you gluten intolerant? Are you eat like all of those things, to also asking those questions also to the person then has to think about like, oh, I need to monitor, when is this happening? When is this not happening? To become more self-aware. And so just birth control on teenage girls is not the answer. Right? So that's like the first thing is they kind of like takes away power. Right? Takes away power. Oh, we'll just make it go away. Oh, you don't need to have a period. Like, why do you want that? You don't need it. When in fact that takes away this opportunity for them to learn about what's going on in their body. Now, I'm not against if you have a teenage girl who's bleeding or there's something going on, it's wonderful that we have things that can actually intervene, but it still doesn't mean that you don't do something else about it. We really need to look at how we can integrate some of the Western medicine, but not necessarily use the paradigm that they're using, like how they use it, right? So there are many ways we can use it, but if we're using it like, oh, you don't need to worry about it, do this, then when you're 35, when you want to have a baby, get off the birth control, right? And so I think this is like a big problem, right? Later. So the earlier, to answer your question, the earlier that we can have people more aware of their manual, they need to have a manual for themselves, right? Write their own manual is going to be important for both boys and girls, for both male and female.
This is where I had a course called Not Your Mama's Menstrual Course a few years ago. And it was all about the seasons of your cycle and like looking at the energetics of your cycle. And then I realized, oh, Adrienne, people don't even know the basics around their cycle. And so I released a course called Body Basics, because just knowing that you have hormonal changes through the month and that the period is not the end of the month, it's actually the beginning, and it's not the only event that happens all month long, was really revolutionary for some of the people that were coming through the door of my practice. And I'm like, wow, we just collectively do not have very basic information around how our bodies work, which takes away our autonomy and our ability to make decisions.
You're right. I mean, if we don't know what it is, or it's deemed not important. Women, and I have this conversation with my female patients, and also the women who are currently on the edge of menopause, which right now there's much more dialogue going on. It's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, let's talk about menopause. And what I say is like, females are almost a different species. Our brains function differently. We're very much connected to nature, where it's very visible of we have a cycle. And when we view in nature, we're like, oh yeah, springtime, babies are born, and then this happens, and then the next thing, the next phase, they go into estrus. And so we also have those phases, but because we can kind of intervene in ways, or we don't necessarily live as close to nature, right? Before we used to like, okay, for the summer, we need to go here. For the winter, we need to go here. We have to follow where the food is, that we had to be much more connected to seasons and understand cycles. And women are, our relationship with the moon, like our symbol is the moon, because of the 28-day cycle. And so understanding like all of that is very powerful, so that you don't make your meetings, your corporate meetings scheduled like right before you're going to have your period, because your brain is going to be a little bit foggy, right? And like understanding like when am I at my best is also to kind of help you to navigate and not expect you, just understand you have a cycle and it's beautiful. It's like a wave, right? And waves are powerful. So you can harness this as well. It's not a curse. It's actually very powerful once you recognize it.
Well, and when we work against that wave for the number of years that we typically tend to in Western culture, then we've emotionally and intellectually made the decision that we're ready to have a baby. But like taking shortcuts to fertility just can't happen.
It's true. Well, your cycle is every month. So initially when someone is trying, they're like, how long have you been trying? Oh, 6 months. It's not working. And it's, well, first of all, we need to, do you know when your fertile window is? And if there are other issues going on, just like deciding to have unprotected relations or sex is not necessarily going to get you pregnant. And that's also the lack of education has been like, oh, if you stop using any kind of protection, you're going to get pregnant right away. But that's not really true. It's really like things have to be in alignment. And it's so energetically and emotionally, and then the physical, like how much inflammation there is, what's going on with your partner, or like lots of different things can easily disrupt the balance, right? And this is not anybody's fault, right? It's not a flaw. It's information about what you need to put together. So I think that, again, what you said, well, like knowing the basics, and my patients, and I'm guessing your patients, because it seems that the people that are interested in alternative or complementary therapies or integrative therapies, that they are highly educated. So my patients are highly educated, college graduates, master's degrees, PhDs, attorneys, all. And then this piece of like, oh, do you know when you ovulate? Or do you know yourself? Like, well, I think it's the middle of the cycle, right? And it's because that has not really been addressed in terms of like, oh, what does my app tell me? Because I'm a kind of like I'm not a fan of apps for this. I really think it's important for women to track it, do it manually, to really like check these things, because the app will say what you're supposed to be doing based on the average of a whole bunch of numbers, but it's not your number. It's not as specific to you. And then that can create this kind of discord, right, of unhappiness because my app is telling me I should be.
Oh man, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, but my app said, yes, it is a very common conversation with people. And I mean, some apps are more sophisticated than others in terms of how they calculate things, but it's still like, it's not going to tell you, oh, you lost your job this month. That's going to affect when you ovulate. That's going to affect the presentation of your cycle. Or, oh, you got married this month. Or, oh, you went on a big trip to Italy. Oh, that's great. But that's going to affect when you ovulate this month. So our bodies are really sensitive to stress, and stress doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's just something that takes us out of our normal biorhythm. And when that happens, it can affect when you ovulate, when your period arrives, whether you spot in the middle of the month, like all of those kinds of things. Oh, well, this was weird. Like, this has never happened before. And it's like, well, your body was under some level of stress. And so that changes your cycle, and an app doesn't account for that.
That's right. But it's also a normal response to stress. It's not abnormal. So if you are in the midst of a crisis or something's happening or you're watching the news cycle and you're flipping out, your body is getting a message that's going, okay, alarm, your cortisol will rise. Like there's so many different things that then, okay, oh, it was just like some stupid thing on YouTube. But your body doesn't know that. And then later on, it's gonna like something's gonna possibly show up. And then you're like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, it happened. I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. But your body is telling another story. And it's normal, right? To respond to stress is normal. There's nothing abnormal about it. It's really like to recognize that we need to do some things to create, I guess, like a buffer or awareness of what can trigger.
Yeah, so that leads me really nicely into the next piece, which we had a great conversation in our pre-recording screening. And one of the things that you had mentioned is that biological and chronological age are not the same. And when we think about years of stress, right? And some people don't even know how stressed they are because they just literally eat stress for breakfast and they're chronically overstressed. But that will affect this chronological versus biological age presentation. So, would you talk a little bit about the difference between the two and how that can factor into the fertility journey?
Oh, sure. And so actually probably live off of that adrenaline hit, right? That's there. And in some cases, they're constitutionally fine with it, right? That's okay. Like they're in the stream of it. But there are others that it doesn't really work for them, or like doing that, like scaring themselves into action. I got to get it done. Doesn't work. So chronological and biological age, you see that some people have more you call senescence, like aging. They have the oxidative stress in their body that they are not getting it out, more inflammation. So in general, we have this assumption because you're younger that you're not as stressed out, like biologically. Like biologically, oh, I'm young, I should be young biologically. But that's not true because now we have like environmental factors that are factoring in. And then you have someone who's like chronologically 40, 50, and they conceived and had a healthy babe. And you're like, wait a second, how's that possible? Because we have the capacity, right? I think we have a more fertility longevity than we are aware of that can be, but we haven't like burned ourselves out, like, or burnt out that. And so the brightest star burns faster, right? Kind of burns down faster. What I've been seeing in my practice has been women that are younger and their ovarian reserve is going down. Their hormone levels are kind of like all over the place. And really, they're told like, you've got the ovaries of a 40-year-old and you're only 28. And so this is what we're looking at. Biological, chronological ages is not the same, 28 years old, but biologically we're looking at, hey, it doesn't look so great. I don't know if that is going to really affect their fertility in the way that a clinic is looking at it. right? Because not having a lot of follicles available doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant, right? And so this is the difference. We see people who are older and they're so youthful and have all that energy, and then we see others that are younger and or you think they're older and they're a lot younger. Of course, if you go to your 20th high school reunion, you're gonna see like, wow, who is that person? They're so old. And you're like, oh my God. Like, yeah, so because they've had a hard life. And usually, like, however they're internalizing, however, so this is where that chronological and biological age, what I say. So just because you're 40 doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to not be able to get pregnant. And interestingly, I was at a meeting with a group of physicians that are into longevity, and one of their longevity doctors. And the guy said, I'm not interested in statistics. He said, I don't care about someone else's numbers. I care about your numbers and what actionable steps we can take with that information. Not like look at this number and compare it to someone else and then decide I'm going to treat you based on somebody else. I'm going to treat you based on you. Right? Like these are your numbers, and I don't care that someone else has similar numbers because that's them and this is you. And I think this is a lot of statistics, there's lots of information out there, but in the end, we need to look individually at the person. And of course, the outcomes are going to make a difference of the motivation of the individual, what they're going to do, what they're willing to do, whatever shifts and changes in order to improve their health. And to see it as a bigger picture, not just like a short term, oh, because I want to get pregnant. Like, that's great. But this is also, you have to look at, hey, I didn't think of my life the same way until I wanted to get pregnant. And that's usually the kind of the thing that is like, oh, hey, I need to do something.
I like that a lot. I had a similar experience. This is my anecdote to match what you just said about like, I don't want to look at the general broad numbers. I want to look at your numbers. I had that experience when I was pregnant with my son, and I went to have an anatomy scan done at 40 years of age. They like looked at my birth date and they looked at me and they looked at my birth date again and they looked at me. And then I automatically got escalated to maternal fetal health for another scan for his heart because they didn't overtly say that it was because of my age. But then when I was at maternal fetal health, they mentioned my age like 6 times. And I'm like, I got so fed up at one point. I'm like, I assure you, I am not your average 40-year-old. Like, can we please stop bringing, yes, I'm aware I'm 40. Like, please stop bringing my age into this. So, but I've also been living in a seasonal way, in an aligned way, planning my work like the time of this podcast recording. Do we think that we're just before Adrian's period? No, because I wouldn't be articulate and I wouldn't be able to talk to you.
I love that.
I plan these recordings around my cycle so that not only can I put the best version of myself forward, but I'm not overspending the bank account of the vital energy that I have in my system, because we inherit some of our chi from our parents, our vital energy, and some of it is our environment, right? And how we live our life and how we nourish our body. And that nourishment is what we feed our mind as much as what we feed our body, and how we move our body, all those kinds of things. And I've been living in a cyclical aligned way for a long time now, and it's made a huge impact in my health. And I find that a lot of people, when they are ready to have a baby and they've made that decision in their head, the conversation around, well, what we're talking about is an alignment of lifestyle, and that is going to take some time. in an Amazon Prime fix it with a pill kind of culture, that it can be a very hard conversation, which a lot of times people's patience around ends up driving them towards IVF quite quickly because they're ready to have a baby now and the magic isn't happening. So, of course, a doctor can do it in a petri dish. And now a word from our Reproductive Rebel sponsor, Embody Space. Your cycle holds wisdom, and the Embody Space cycle tracking app helps you unlock it. Track your cycle in the only fully encrypted app designed to protect your most sacred data. Get daily guidance tailored to every phase, from bleeding to blooming, with rituals, herbs, lifestyle tips, dietary support, and more. All tailored for your body's natural rhythms, because your body's story is yours alone. Embody Space, your private portal to cycle wisdom. Download now and reclaim your rhythm. And now, back to the show.
What I found is that it's not really a viable option. And the reason I say that is that it's kind of like, how long is this going to take? Okay, if I work with you on the shortest amount, and this is something when I'm working with someone, I'm like, okay, I need to see like for at least 3 cycles, so 12 weeks, 3 cycles consistently. And it's really going to depend on their compliance, their ability to manage all these other things. And oftentimes that is like, okay, after like 3 months, we're in kind of like a stable space of like figuring it out. Are you taking your prenatals? Are you organizing your like? It's a lot to get someone to like fix their sleep, to manage a lot of these different things, to the learning curve of recognizing what pulls them off, and then to like implement something to be like, okay, I'm not doing that, I'm changing this, right? So that's like a lot. So 3 months is even a very short period of time. So at least 6 months. So if you can give yourself 6 months to a year to say, I got to get off of this thing, I want to start switching a few things here, I need to clean up my diet in a way that is going to, where I have the opportunity to try things out. So, but if you tell someone, "Hey, you need to work 6 months to a year," they're like, oh, but I can just go to a fertility clinic and I'll get it done in a month. Like they'll do it right away. But what happens is if they don't take care of these other things, they don't really have good responses, because what they're asking their body to do, it's a big challenge to take a lot more hormones, to flip them off balance. And there may be like, okay, we got a lot of follicles. We did okay, but then they don't fertilize or there's issues with them. So it's not really a shortcut. So then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to do 2-3 cycles. And then at some point they got to take a break. And then during the break, this is when they need to go like, wait a second, we've been like going hardcore injecting and my numbers are not coming back, or only 4 follicles, or like, and then it's like, okay, wait a second, all of this time that they've been spending and putting their body through this, I call it an ordeal because it's not fun. And if they are going to go through it and working with me or working with you, it's fine. I'm not against it. It's really, you need to be in your best possible shape so that you can actually receive what you need and not disturb your system to really make a big disruption, because that just set fires off like, okay, no reproduction, like it's too chaotic internally. So they don't necessarily, I don't think of them as saving so much time or getting that immediate gratification, because they end up subjecting themselves to like every single morning taking blood or looking at this number, that, and it creates an incredibly stressful environment for them. And especially if they're still in a stressful environment, And so it's not really a shortcut. It's actually like much, in my opinion, more damaging to their system, which then later on they need to like unravel. And so it's better to do it right the first time or to take care of it before the foundation, and then you can build on top of that.
I'm so glad you said that. I have this sentiment also, and yet I do see a lot of people who believe that it can serve as a shortcut, and then they've gone through so many injections and they've gone through stim rounds and all of these things, and they're not sleeping well and they feel awful, and they go through their transfer and they're like, but it didn't take. And I'm like, I know. But it has to do with the environment. Like, there's been a lot of stress and there needs to be a break from that. So the body, the primal brain, doesn't think that you're being chased by a tiger.
Right. And there's no real guarantee with those treatments, they increase odds to a certain degree, right? Because they make sure, okay, you ovulated, they make sure that sperm meets egg, they make sure it gets to a certain point, but it's still not a guarantee. But I was having a conversation with someone at that longevity circle, and so his wife had twins, and I was like, oh, IVF? He's like, yeah, of course, yeah. And I said, oh, are you guys done? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, you still have embryos? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, really? Like, and he's like, yeah, I think it's like 4 or maybe 5. And says, well, what are you going to do with? And he's like, I don't know. We don't know. Kind of like segueing into some of the conversations we'd had last time, like now with, on the one hand, if couples are struggling, and in some cases, the fertility clinics are able to offer a service to help them to have a child, right? That there may have been so many other hoops or health issues and things that they had to overcome, that they would have been a couple, like in the last century, would have been a couple that didn't have children or couldn't have children. And then at the same time, we're looking at an industry that already had like a 29% growth in terms of facilitating, but also it's an industry. And not everybody has access to it. And then there's also another aspect. Does everybody really need it? Because, again, going back to from the beginning, we're not really learning about our own bodies and our own health, that we end up arriving at a point where it's, if we want this thing, then what are the real options? And is that the truth? Is that really the truth also?
Yes. So this gets into the topic that is top of mind because of where we are in politics right now and conversations around IVF. And I had an interview with a guest, Lakia Holmes, on the podcast recently. And she was talking about how, like, if she hadn't had the fertility benefits at her employer, she wouldn't have been able to afford to become a parent, and how important access to that program was in order for her to have her beautiful little girl now. And so access becomes a really big issue.
Yeah, well, it's also, it's a bigger issue of, well, let's say a bigger also health issue, right? Access to health care, like real health care. And how is that influenced? So we need to be able to tease out what's true, what's not true. And this is where kind of knowing your body and getting it into alignment, that it will help to be like a divining rod of, does that sound right? Does that feel right? Or, hey, I know when I eat certain foods, I don't feel good afterwards. Do I need a test to confirm that I have an allergy? No. Do you? Don't eat that. You know what? So in some cases, I got tested for it. I don't have this thing. And it's like, well, but you have a sensitivity to it. So I think it's probably better if you avoid it and then see how you can do this as you're like a citizen scientist, right? You can like learn what works for you and what doesn't work and not ignore or override your own your divine intuition because somebody said, who is a quote, authority, told you that's not possible or that doesn't sound right. Or to kind of counter, you need to like kind of do your homework, but also the homework is you got to connect it internally as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember when I was on my fertility journey to my son, and I had been escalated up to the reproductive endocrinologist's office, and he was like, just was very flippant and was like, your test results are fine. Your husband's test results are fine. I have no idea why you can't get pregnant, but we can do IVF with ICSI. I'll get you pregnant. And he walked out of the office. And I'm like, wait, what's ICSI? Number one. Number two, we are getting pregnant. I'm just not staying pregnant. So that doesn't answer my question. So there was this very boastful feeling of, well, I can play God and I can get you pregnant. But it goes back to what you were saying about the fact that the building blocks that are going into that process are affected by your stress, your lifestyle, what you're eating, all of those things. And okay, that's great. You can put these things together in a petri dish, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to yield the outcome that you're looking for. And there's so many aspects around our bodies and our health that with a little education, they could come into alignment and we wouldn't be pursuing some of these interventive services because they are a business, they are an industry, they're a very wealthy industry, and they're becoming wealthier. I'm seeing younger and younger women being suggested to go to an RE and go down the IVF journey where, you know, a lot of education, particularly in the current landscape, could essentially course correct a lot of those challenges for a large number of people. I mean, are there going to be people who would still need some level of intervention in order to be able to get pregnant? Sure. I'm not saying that knowing your body is going to solve all of those problems. However, it's becoming a bigger and bigger business. And when you hold the cards of that information,
there's another issue. There's a thing here. And to a certain degree, I mean, I would agree that if someone is having challenges of getting pregnant, or if the embryos are not sticking, you'd have to go like, okay, is there a genetic factor that's happening? Like what's going on, right? There's something that's either they're on the one hand or something else is creating a disruption. However, one of the things now, and of course I'm in New York City, that with couples that are doing IVF, that they're doing the retrievals, they are fertilizing, getting the cells to divide to get to a certain stage. Then they take a little snip of cells, freeze the embryo, and then they do genetic testing so that they will not, in some clinics, they don't want to do a transfer of an embryo that might have some genetic issue, right? Because they're not going to do that. And I mean, I would say, wow, of course, you, after going through everything, and if you're miscarrying and you have no idea, and then you could find out like, oh, some of these embryos are not going to survive, that if we do a transfer, we definitely would want to have the ones that are going to be viable. On the other hand, there is a whole other aspect of really kind of curating the birth, or I want boys, I want girls. And I'm not really sure, there's this funny piece of, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And then at the same time, it's really like, wow, we're like making genetic decisions and we're still within the natural world. So this is another, like, IVF and IUI are not unnatural, because I also believe they're just not probable without this intervention. But if it wasn't natural, it wouldn't happen, right? If it wasn't possible, it wouldn't happen. It's just very much on the edge of, would that happen in nature? Would the egg and sperm outside your body ever meet that way and then somehow come back in? Like, and no, probably not. But because it is possible, we say that there's a natural aspect to it, right? Because this is life. Like, are we making choices that are, what do you call it, socially engineering the population? Possibly. Right?
It opens the door for a lot of ethical questions, and how we use this kind of technology, how this technology can curate the future. So I think that, like, with the way that reproductive health is becoming more mechanized, asking some of these questions becomes more important than ever in the social landscape, but then also in the legislative one, because there has been so much change in the narrative in recent months. And where those lines are, I think it's just important. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to kind of essentially round out this episode with some of these questions out there, so that we can critically think around reproductive health, the mechanisms we use to build families, the implications and outcomes of those interventions, and how that can affect our health, our children's health. Because when our bodies aren't in right relationship going into a procedure like that, this is that idea of you inherit the health, or part of the health picture, of your parent at the time of conception. So as healthy as they are when they conceived you, whether it is through a technological means or natural, without any interventions, what you inherit is their health picture at that time. So it becomes really important to not only know about your body, but to be in the best health that you possibly can. I saw a reel not that long ago, and I reshared it with my face going, heck yeah, because it was about a husband going, well, if you're going to carry the baby for 9 months, I need to spend 9 months getting into the best shape of my life. I was like, well, yeah, like it literally takes two to tango, no matter how the sperm and the egg come together. And our health collectively is critically important in that equation. And so when there are things swirling in the political landscape around, we need to have more babies and all of these kinds of things, but we're not addressing the environmental factors as to why people aren't doing it, the social factors, the financial factors, all of that, then it ends up being that the people who get to reproduce are the ones that have access to certain technologies and certain ways of life, and it limits others. And so these are just questions that I think are really interesting to ask and to kind of float out there in conversation while we're navigating a very complex landscape right now around reproductive health and reproductive rights. Before I let you go, I do want to note that you wrote an article, and I would love for people to check out your article if you want to share a little bit about that too.
And now we will take a short break from our episode to share an offering that will take your healing to a whole new level. How would it feel to stress less, feel more spaciousness in your body, all while reducing physical symptoms? I can tell you from personal experience, it's one of the most empowering and freeing experiences one can have. Rebel Remembered is a year-long journey using goddess archetypes, body wisdom, and ancient modalities to bring a level of health to your body unlike anything else. As a Chinese medicine practitioner, it has always been clear to me that the emotional body is at the root of physical symptoms in the body. This program is truly holistic, addressing physical symptoms by exploring spiritual and emotional themes, much like this episode. This opportunity only opens once a year, so be sure to get on the waiting list for when enrollment opens this fall. The link is in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
Oh, yeah. So I actually just pulled it. I was like, this was something that I wrote in 2019. And really, it was I wrote why women's bodies are not considered their own property. And a lot of like what we talked about or we've been talking about is really this kind of idea like everybody else is an authority and we're not. And so if somebody who is a medical professional says, oh, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. And even if you're like, oh, it doesn't feel right for me, but I have to go with it because they said that, it's just the constant kind of pushing you along into this going towards the slaughter or whatever. This idea of like reinforcing that you don't know what you're doing. Like, let me tell you about your body, or you don't know, and gaslighting. And it's really important to look at all of those messages that we're constantly receiving and also what's out in the media. And of course, I mentioned The Handmaid's Tale, which I remember when it first, Handmaid's Tale, when it first came out, I was like, oh my God, with Faye Dunaway. So it's this to kind of like really take a look at what is influencing you. Like, is there really a fertility cliff? Are your eggs no good? Or is there the decline as soon as you hit 35? What is the truth in that? And really, what is your truth? Right? So the issue is really like understanding your truth about it. And that on the one hand, yes, those numbers have some relevance, right? For sure. But then how are they being used in terms of manipulation, right? And I think we have to be even more since 2019 to be aware of how much manipulation is happening. And so like my patients that are younger and they work in companies that they like, okay, you can freeze your eggs. Oh, great. I'm freezing my eggs. So I have young eggs for in the future if I want to have children. And I'm like, well, now that they're out of your body and they're being held by a private company, what's the deal with that? Like, if you don't use them all, or now they've become like a piece of property, right? It's kind of like they're now this thing. And I don't know where it stands with the law, but it's not in your person, it's outside of your person. And could they decide to, we're just going to take over this fertility. This is all this biomedical material that whatever it is, we don't know. Like, what's going on? And I think that those are the questions to be like, okay, great. I have these eggs for the future so I can have healthy babies. I'm so excited. And at the same time, you just got into a contract where, things may, like, who knows what's going to happen? Are you going to be able to have access to them? Are they all going to be there? Are they going to be like a couple of them that are like, what happens? And I think there was one company that there was some power outage and the containment field that was holding frozen embryos, like something happened with it. And then there's like a lawsuit, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a risk. These are risks. They could mix up your tank, or You go to a different state. Can you get it back? But one of the things is that I say is like, okay, once you take your follicles, your eggs out, you've started the first step of IVF. So just so you know that, like you've already in a weird, like you don't recognize that this is part one. So you've already signed up for it. And that's the kind of I guess, situation we're in where this could be the way we reproduce in the future. That's the way it is.
This is exactly why I wanted to cover chronological age versus biological age, because it's starting to become one of those conversations that's normalized as oh, you're getting close to 35. Maybe you should consider freezing your eggs. And it's like, hey, you're a little over 35. This is the youngest your eggs are going to be. I've heard that statement so many times, and I'm like, oh, but there's so many more considerations beyond just that. And so I thank you so much for having this thought-provoking conversation with me. This is the kind of conversation that I've always hoped for on Reproductive Rebel, because I want to push the envelope around what people are thinking, and things that are normalized in culture don't mean that they're normal. Whether this is like everybody is going the route of IVF, or even something as simple as period cramps are normal. We normalize a lot of things in our culture, but they're not actually normal, or they invite some critical thinking outside of the box that we are assuming that this procedure is being done in our highest and best good, but it's a business. And
it doesn't mean that it's good. Normalizing it is, it's also, there's a lot of normalization of violence and misogyny when we see in TV shows and crime shows, and we get very accustomed to, oh yeah, that's sure, without really thinking about the consequences or our future, like in a way to really, we're thinking of it only from one vantage point.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for willing to go the distance with me. I really appreciate it. So if you were to leave our listeners with one final thought, what would that be? And how can they find you?
So the final thought that I will leave you with is that you have this innate power, divine power, and something known as divine intuition that I invite you to cultivate. And this is something that is I would say like a lifetime practice. It's practice to connect much stronger mind-body connection that will then inform you, and then you develop within yourself. So that's something that is individual homework to do, will make your life so much better. And how can people find me? Easiest probably is on Instagram, which would be Integrative Healing Arts NYC. And there's a link tree that's there, and you can reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tsao-Lin. I really appreciate your wisdom, your insight. You're willing to go the distance with squishy topic that seems to be a hot button one these days. And until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.